So before us we have Ms. Corinne Woods, the Director of United Nations Millennium Campaign. Thank you for getting time to be with us. I have a few questions for you with regards to the conference. Briefly explain to us about the My World, the UN Global Survey to Citizens, and what key issues have emanated from the survey conducted.
Thank you. Well, I think the purpose of having the My World survey was really because when the Millennium Development Goals were developed, it was essentially 8 very smart people who sat in the room and wrote the survey. And what we wrote the Millennium Development Goals. And what we realised was that if you're truly going to implement the new development agenda as the MDGs expire in 2015, you have to involve people, not just those who are very smart, the academics, not just the scientists, not just those who are in the development community, but ordinary everyday citizens, be that my father, be that your daughter, be that somebody sitting in a village in Zambia. Everybody should have a say in what is going on. So we decided to reach out directly to citizens, to go to them and ask them not what should the new development agenda be, but really what's true in your life. If you look at what we're all sitting and talking about, what are the priorities for you and your family? Choose 6 of them. Tell us what really matters to you. And so we've been out and we've had 2 million people who've responded globally. We've had 2 million people globally who've responded. They're predominantly from Africa. And the African voices have said, like the rest of the world, education, healthcare is important. Across the world, and particularly in Africa, honest and responsive government comes up as something, and jobs. But where we hear an African voice that is different is saying infrastructure, roads and transport, these things matter a great deal. So what that tells us is actually across the world we're saying the same things, but there are some small differences. What it also tells us, the response rates from Africa, the interest in engaging, has really told us how much African citizens want to be part of this new development agenda. We also went in depth in a few countries with the support of various governments, here in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Mozambique, and there we heard one thing, cross-cutting, be it health, be it education, it's inequalities. Unless we tackle inequalities, we're not going to realise all these priorities that people are speaking to. So the My World survey, you can click, you can do it on mobile phone, but the majority of people have done it the old-fashioned way, on pens and paper. And there's still an opportunity for people to come onto the My World survey, give their voice, because we've got 18 months till we actually agree the new agenda. And if a citizen voice isn't in there, we may not have the ambitious agenda that we want.
Great. Kindly highlight to us the core issues arising from the African narrative, structural transformation, and the challenges of financing Africa's post-2015 development agenda.
I think the voices and the process to really articulate this financing of the new development agenda and the idea of structural transformation is something Africa is leading the world in. That African group who came together, economists, civil society players, really the sort of smart thinkers, and said, if we're going to do this, what is it going to take? And the agenda that has been laid out in the various papers says, first of all, let's look at our own resources and let's look at what we need to do. Let's look at domestic taxation, but also let's look at some other things like illicit capital flight, that money isn't being taken away from Africa in order to really deliver the development agenda. And let's see ODA in its context as something useful, but not the thing that will drive development. Development will be driven in Africa, by Africans, for Africans. And I think that's the core that whole piece of work says. Now, what's interesting is now we start to see groups in Latin America wanting to do and have a similar conversation, groups in Asia wanting to have a similar conversation. And what will be fascinating is to see if in Latin America, is that going to be the same discourse as in Africa? What will come out of Asia? And when we come together across Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Arab states, and have a conversation about what should this agenda be about? And that says to us something very different. It says development being in the hands of the people who really need to drive it and who need to take it forward.
Lastly, in your views, what issues does Africa as a region need to address for the post-2015 agenda to be realized?
Well, somebody very wise said to me the other day, perfect goals 5% implemented are not as good as imperfect goals 100% implemented. In the end, words are words, but action is where it really matters. So, and this isn't Africa specifically, but we need to move from good policies, good words, good intentions, to really drilling down what it takes to implement and realise the new development agenda. So thinking about what will be the role of various players, various stakeholders. What can ordinary individual citizens do? What can civil society do? What can faith groups do? What can the private sector do? And really starting to work that through and understand what will it take to implement and realise as opposed to speak about and pronounce. And I think that's not just Africa, that's across the world. So we need to think about implementation and realisation. And now is the time, because the danger is 2015, we have a new agreement, and then we say, and then what? What do we do? Where do we go? So we need to think about the implementation now.
Okay, thank you so much
Thank you.
for your time.
Thank you.